Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Hadamiel, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast-track personal growth, improve lives, and empower parents, and also save relationships, families, and marriages. So on the Nurturing Astrology podcast, I will offer practical guidance for applying astrology to all of these important areas of life. I'll offer insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait to get started. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast, episode 1 of Circle Time Chats. That's what we're calling these because Cornelia Hansen and I are going to do a series of conversations and chats specifically for conscious parenting with astrology and to help our parents. So today's episode, we're going to dive into first to sort of lay the groundwork for understanding how we work and our approach and what we see as the most valuable and important approach to child charts or parenting with astrology. So it's called Astrology for Conscious Parenting, the benefits, do's, and don'ts, because there are those. So we'll start with 7 ways astrology can empower you as a parent, because there's a lot of benefits. And I want to go into the different benefits and maybe a little insight into why we think those are important. And then we'll go into some important do's and don'ts, because it is a sensitive, issue or subject to do child's charts or astrology for families. And we want to do it in the most nurturing, respectful, and ethical way. And I think that's the biggest thing Cornelia and I agree on, and why we're so passionate about the work that we're doing is to help families in a real way that can make real differences in their lives, right?
Right.
So welcome, Cornelia, and let's dive into episode 1.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
All right. So I think, and I've thought about this long and hard and kind of put these in order in different ways at different times. But I feel like the most important thing that astrology can do for parents is to help, not eliminate, but definitely to lessen the fears and anxiety that come with I'm doing it wrong, I'm going to screw them up, right? That fear that all parents have of I'm going to screw them up. How am I going to do this, right? So
and also when I see a behavior I don't like, I say, oh dear, I'm doing something wrong. It's so easy to feel guilty about everything.
Right?
And we want to relieve that sense of guilt, because once you understand about temperament, et cetera, and other things, then it makes it a lot easier to understand a child's behavior, that it varies, it changes as they grow and develop. And so don't always feel guilty or try to take the guilt on you or blame somebody else.
It's so true. Guilt is a huge one I know a lot of parents struggle with, and they start to look to astrology for answers. And I think we'll get to that. But ultimately, the reason why I feel like it can eliminate or help sort of free us up from that kind of pain and anxiety is because astrology shows us that our children come in with their own soul contract, with their own unique signature, regardless of, what we bring to the table. They come in with their own soul's journey. And
exactly.
We're all born uniquely with our unique nature, right? And what we can do as parents with the help of astrology, I think, is to create the best environment. Like we learn in child development, the goodness of fit, right? Understanding how we can create an environment that best suits or fits or can nurture that child's soul path. And that's where our work with ourselves comes in, and how we can learn and adjust through understanding own astrology, how to create that best environment for the child and their unique journey. But ultimately, their soul has a life path, right? And that doesn't really have anything to do with us. And we're not solely responsible for every little thing. And that's a really hard concept, I think, for a parent to wrap their brain around, because you feel so responsible. You gave this thing life and now you have to keep it alive, and you're responsible for everything it experiences. And that's,
well, I think it's some of it's because we've been taught that idea that the child is in a blank state.
Yep.
And we write on it. Okay. But that's not the way it is, because the child comes in with its own temperament. And we have to understand that temperament in order to adjust our parenting to make the best fit where that child is going to develop in a positive way.
Exactly. And also, our child comes in, if you believe in such, with many lifetimes have before, right? So on a larger soul path through ancestry and what have you, right? So many soul incarnations, perhaps, right? That they're on a certain journey. That's what the nodes show us, right? That again is much bigger than just this one life. And we put all our eggs in this basket sometimes because we're in it as humans in this life, in these relationships.
I know. You know, in the Jewish religion, when a baby is born, they bring it before the rabbi to get a blessing. But what they're told is that the baby has been given into their care, and they are only responsible for how they raise that child. But once the child is 13, they become an adult and they're responsible for themselves. But you still have a responsibility of being the best parent that you can. So whether that requires reading, I know when I became a parent, I didn't know anything. I just felt like totally inadequate. So the first thing I did was go to the Red Cross and learn how to bathe the baby, how to hold them, how to feed them, how to burp them, you know, remember, put them on your shoulder. So I felt equipped when the baby finally came. At least I knew how to handle it, you know. But it's like you don't have a manual.
Exactly. And astrology can provide some insight, you know, a little bit of that manual, which is, I think, so like a helpful tool to have. But you're absolutely right, you know, and I think that's one of the biggest do's we could say right now is like, take some parenting classes if you're unsure, you know. Definitely that's on our to-do list, right?
Exactly.
And I know
read a child development textbook so you can follow along. They have it in categories, you know, physical development, social development, emotional development, and so on. So you can see where they're going, what their path is going to be like in terms of maturation points.
Yes. Mommy and Me preschool.
When is my kid going to walk? Yeah, right. Yeah. When is my kid going to walk? You know, he's not walking yet. How come? Well, there's a range in there when children walk. Some walk as early as 8 months. Some wait until they're 18 months. So depends on the individual child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Mommy and Me preschool was like so life-saving in the beginning. And I felt like I had kind of a leg up because I was learning all of this stuff in the Mommy and Me preschool about child development. And I also had the astrology looking at it at the same time. So I was like, literally from day one was in this like experiment of like learning the things about child development and knowing the astrology and my child and how it was unique. And it was really fascinating to see them come together. And that's why I was like, I know these two things have to go together, but I had to go through my own experience of witnessing that, you know, and nurturing my son through those things and knowing also his temperament and his chart. And that leads us right into the number 2 benefit, which is the priceless insight that astrology gives us about our child's temperament and sensitivity. Right. Because as you teach and have taught me that we are born with our temperament and it is measurable.
Every child, doesn't matter what color, creed, race, nationality, every child has a temperament. We all do.
We all do. We're born with it. And ultimately, it doesn't necessarily change over time, but the environment, and like we said, the goodness of fit, like that environment can influence the way we nurture that temperament, right? So
Right.
there's some
Let's give an example. For instance,
Sure.
if you've got a highly active baby
Mhm.
that you put them in the crib and they end up in another corner, or they're always cooking and screaming and, moving, and they don't want to be restrained and everything. Well, you've got a highly active child there. And if you live in a small apartment, you're going to have to realize that if you keep the child in the apartment all the time, you're going to be going crazy because they'll be bouncing off the walls. It's like my grandson, he was like that. So we could spend 8 hours in the park, with just him playing all day without, it was great because then when he came home, he let all that energy out and he could relax and go to sleep better.
I think that's
So
the biggest thing.
We try to adjust. Yeah, we try to adjust our environment for the child's needs.
Absolutely. And that's where knowing ourselves is so important, because if you're not a highly active person, you have to create an outlet still for that child to get out that activity level so that they're, because they're going to drive you nuts in that small apartment, bouncing off the walls. If you're not finding an outlet for them to, free up that energy, work that out, and then be able to settle at night and be able to sleep and have good, nighttime routine and stuff. I know a lot of parents struggle with nighttime routine, and they realize they're not really giving that child enough activity during the day to settle, for them to be able to settle. So understanding what your child's temperament is, you can kind of find tips and tools for how to nurture what they need and help them in the grand scheme of things in terms of relationships, making good choices. Temperament is foundational because, like you have taught me, that we're born with it and it's measurable, right? And you have created,
it's observable and it's measurable. You can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see one baby. I had 2 mothers come in with their kids to a parenting class, a mommy and me class. They were 18 months old. And one lady had this warm, sunny, outgoing little girl. And the other mother had this boy who was whining and demanding and fussing and this and that. And she kept asking me, why is, he's so, what am I doing wrong? Because look at him and look at my friend, and she's not having these problems. What am I doing wrong? And I said, you're not doing anything wrong. I said, it's really his temperament. And then she looked at me with her eyes and she said, it's not my fault. Yes, it's not your fault. So giving her some resources to learn to understand about her child's temperament gave her an opportunity to change her parenting skills to make it better fit this child's needs. That's the beauty of temperament, that we have a technique now in astrology that we can use to find that child's temperament, even at birth.
That's right. And that alleviates step 1. It creates a little ease from that anxiety that you feel, right? Because you now have tools. And your book, Understanding the Child in the Chart, Kid Wheels, is a breakdown of that process. So I highly recommend that book. And then the next benefit, of course, is the path for better understanding how our children think, learn, process information, and communicate, right? And I'm sure all our astrology friends are going, yes, Mercury, right? But we can learn a lot about how to talk to our kids so they'll listen, which is another great parenting book, right? Through understanding their Mercury and the way that they take in information, process information, and communicate. And it's priceless also for helping us in their early years of schooling and education, so that we can inform the teacher in a non-astrological format what your child might need if you understand their learning style or what they need in a classroom. Hey, my kid needs to sit closer to the board, or, my kid's easily distractible, so he needs to sit where he's not going to be distracted. So there's a lot of great insight, I think, that can come into helping parents with understanding Mercury as that communication planet and how to start relating to others, their needs, desires, thoughts, feelings, all of that. We have to communicate, right?
Right.
You have any thoughts on that one? What's your biggest?
Well, I think it's important to understand a little bit about learning styles because it helps us present information to a child in a good way.
Mm.
One thing we did learn about studying learning styles was that everybody has usually a different way of learning. Some are more auditory, some are more visual, some are more tactile or kinesthetic. They learn by doing and moving and manipulating things. So understanding that learning style helps a lot in how you present information to them.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that the more we present information through many senses, okay, so you learned a concept. Can you draw a picture of it representing what you just learned? Or can you make up a song about it? Or can you act it out? Learning through multiple senses helps the child retain all the information better. So they're not limited just by one way of having information. So the more you can enrich that environment for learning, putting it into different sensory modalities, the better they're going to learn.
Yes, that's huge. And that's where preschool comes in the beginning so wonderfully, right? Because they are doing that. They're giving them all these different ways of learning through their different senses and through play.
The studies have shown that preschool experience has such wonderful benefits even into adulthood.
Yeah.
That children who've had a preschool experience are ready for school, they're ready for learning because they've learned the foundations already. We did a study with UCLA on our preschool class. They came in and studied them while they were in preschool, and then they also followed through when they went to kindergarten and showed how the benefit of having that year, that fourth year in a preschool, made them increasingly easy transfer to kindergarten, whereas children who were coming into kindergarten for the first time didn't know their colors or they didn't know this or that these other kids had learned in preschool. So you can see the benefits because the brain right then is in this active period where it's learning so much between 2 and 4. Yeah. They're like little scientists in their laboratories saying, oh, how does this work? How does that work? Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sometimes we don't understand that. Why is he putting things in the where the TV, where the tape goes? You know,
yes.
He's just learning how to play with buttons.
Yes. Yes. Well, Cornelia and I have done a few workshops already last year. We started with a temperament one. We did one about Mercury, and we even did a little research project on the learning styles. So those are all available too, if you want to check those out. But I think that we could talk for days about Mercury and this subject for sure.
Yes.
And we probably will in the future. So stay tuned. But the next one we'll talk about is the benefit of giving parents an opportunity to get ahead of and manage behavior issues that come with the key developmental stages and growing pains that all kids go through. Because we've talked about how those developmental cycles fall naturally into the frameworks of our life cycles, astrological planetary cycles. And so let's
just talk about the Mars cycle. We came up with the Mars cycle. Every 2 years. The child goes through an active learning period, and then the following 2 years consolidates all that information. It's joining different parts of the brain to put all that together. The sensory and the motor together. That's the first 2 to 4 years, and they're learning so much at that time, and the brain is developing. So the more stimulus they have, the more dendrites are going to form in their brains, and the more able they're going to be able to learn.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say also with Mars? I know we did Managing Mars in the Chart workshop last year too, where it really is also where they're exerting that sense of authority and they want to do it themselves. That sort of personal authority, which we want to nurture in a positive way.
Yes.
Because
Without getting angry.
without getting angry. Yeah. And it's tough, but I mean, understanding where your child needs these freedoms to grow and explore, and where they need structure and routine is a big part of getting ahead of those, and knowing that, and also recognizing that, like we were saying, there's a framework of child development and framework, or the timing of these cycles, but they're not door to door. And that's why your child may not walk as fast or talk as quickly and have different learning styles, or
that's why we should not ever compare one child
right
to the next.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Even in your own family. Why aren't you more like your big brother?
Yeah.
No, we can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think that's a big one, and knowing like what's coming on the grander scale. Like we've talked about the 9-year-old crisis, or the first Jupiter return, that first Saturn square at 7. Those first years are so important. And then they have that first Saturn square at 7. So there's so many great insights into understanding the planetary cycles in terms of child development. And this is an area that I know that we'll go into a lot more throughout this series, because there's so many benefits to that. So we'll put a pin in Saturn.
We have cycles that affect us all through life.
Exactly. So, but for us, parents is like remembering, so these are the beginning stages. And even that Mars cycle, it's every 2 years, and we all get an every 2 year return of our Mars. So we're always learning and growing and evolving and implementing the things that we're learning, right? It's this.
Yes, and pruning out the things that we're not using.
And pruning out, exactly, the releasing. We can't leave out that part, right? So I find that is a huge benefit of understanding child development, and then the planetary cycles and how they actually can support each other and do support.
Yes, and we did a tape on brain stages also.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, that was so fascinating for me, because that was like your area of expertise, and we were going deep into the stages of the brain and how they actually do relate to the Mars cycle. So
why is a 9th grader so different than an 11th grader? Well, you'll find it's because of what's going on in the brain.
Yeah. So fascinating.
But you have to know that information to understand it, so you know what's coming up. Although there's been a lot of books written now about the teenage brain. So that's always good too. The more information you have, the better.
Absolutely.
And the same 2 ladies have a book on how to talk to teens. So teens will listen. Okay. That's another good book on how to talk to teens.
So many resources. We'll have to, I have a list of like resources on my website of like different books, but I should probably add some more parenting ones.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's fascinating. We can, it's really was wonderful to learn about how Mars actually is really big in terms of brain stages, because we associate the brain and thinking and learning with Mercury, and actually Mars is very much involved. So that was another like aha moment, that was really fascinating. And again, learning how the entire chart and the whole thing works together, that it isn't just one placement. And that is another one to remember, is that nothing is in isolation.
That's why we do progressions.
Yes. Okay. So the next one is astrology can give priceless and objective tool for co-parenting, right? And better negotiating parent strategies and what best suits the child, not necessarily the parents. So whether you're married or co-parenting or partnering, really understanding our parenting style and our different views and approaches to parenting through our own experiences or our own astrology, which can be seen as well, is priceless for creating that environment and relationship health for you and your partner, so that you're also being a good example. I always tell my husband, like, we are the main example that our son is going to get of a healthy relationship. So it is imperative that we do our work to have a healthy relationship and be a good example of that. And that's the case.
I think understanding that parenting style, because if you came from a permissive background where you were given a lot of independence to do things on your own, you tend to be more permissive with your child. But if you're married to somebody who came with from a family where it was spare the rod and spoil the child attitude, more authoritarian, then that can be a source of conflict between the parents, which isn't good. But if you can discuss these openly and say, well, look, I know I'm a little permissive and you're authoritarian, so we've got to kind of combine our expectations of the child so we don't confuse him. And then because we end up blaming each other, oh, you're too tough on him, oh, you're too sweet to him, you're spoiling him, you're too nice to him, so you don't want to get into the blame game because your parenting styles are different. You want to become conscious of them and discuss them. Because you want to be on the same page with your kid, same expectations, the same consequences, so that you're both working together as a team.
Yes, you want to be a united front. It's important. It really is. Because then kids start to play parents against each other too, when they know what they can get away with, and so they're pretty smart, and so being a united front is really important.
They learn to manipulate parents. Well, daddy said no, but I'll go to mommy, she'll let me do it. Yeah, so they learn how to manipulate really quick.
Absolutely. All right, so number 6 is astrology provides us this new language for teaching our children about individuality and compassion for our unique personalities, approaches. Astrology validates first and foremost in so many ways, and that's the thing I tell parents, like, you can observe these qualities in your child, but astrology can validate why, you're witnessing of the observation, and it helps you empower your child that, you're a little bit different, or you take things in this way, but your friend maybe, has a different approach. And it really, I think, promotes this compassion for differences, which we need so much of in this world right now, right?
We need a lot of tolerance, yes. Different than I, but that's okay to be different, yes.
Yes, tolerance, right? So how we engage with each other in an authentic way where we can share what we really think or need or, feel about something, or without feeling that we have to please mom and dad or live up to an expectation. I think these are all ways to nurture our children and empower them to be more tolerant and more compassionate for themselves. I have this sensitive little guy who's like so hard on himself sometimes. And I tell him, if your buddy was feeling bad or this happened to your buddy, what would you say, or how would you treat them? Oh, well, I would give him a hug, or I would do this, Well, why can't you do that for yourself, hon? Like, give yourself the same, love and care that you would offer a friend, right? Or recognize that we all come from different homes and backgrounds and cultures and the whole thing. And we want to be curious and learn from each other and support each other, not, judge or, bully or be mean because they're different than you. Right.
Or label people.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And then number 7, the biggest one I feel, in my conscious parenting with astrology, or my nurturing astrology approach, it starts with us, right? It always starts with the parent, always starts with you. And so astrology is a constant opportunity for our own personal growth. Constant. Exactly. And understanding where and how we can really relate with our children, parent ourselves, like you said, recognize the experiences we had as a child and where we're coming from and what we're putting into, we're all coming from we're all products of our environment, right? And our experiences. But knowledge is power, and working on yourself and knowing, how you've adapted to the experiences you had and how you may be projecting those onto your child or your family or whatever, in the hopes that you do it better or different, or, not do it as bad, whatever that is. But ultimately, it starts with us. We set the tone, and whenever there's a trigger, and you're angry at your partner or your kid or you're frustrated, I always go, okay, what's up with me? What is that thing in preschool?
Yes.
What is the preschool thing? It's HALT, right? It's hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? So it's like whenever there's a trigger or problem, like, what is it? Am I hungry? Am I angry? What am I angry about? Am I feeling sad or lonely? Do I need something? Am I tired? Like there's always something that's triggering it.
And the corollary to that is, if you understand why you're feeling that way, is to communicate that.
Absolutely.
To say to your husband, I'm too tired for this, or I'm just overwhelmed with work I have to do, or whatever it is. You express that feeling so the person has an opportunity to say, okay, I better leave her alone.
Absolutely.
We have to educate other people. So if we don't talk about why we're snapping at people, then they're just going to snap back,
Absolutely.
But if you I used to do that in high school with my students. I said, listen, I'm not feeling well today, so I think you should be on your toes, okay? And let's just all have a good time, but just realize that I'm irritable and I can be set off. So just letting them know that was like, oh, okay.
Absolutely. I tell that when if I'm doing a consult with a couple, or, trying to help a mom out with her, relationship with her husband, it's like, yeah, you've got to communicate. Yes. It just will free you up, and it just provides that person knows how to respond to you or how not to respond to you. You know what I mean? You cannot assume, and that's the biggest thing of, knowing yourself and where you're coming from. Then you're able to authentically inform the others in your life where you're at in any given moment, and not to blame, but say, hey, like, I'm having a bad day. I don't know what's going on, but I need a little time or space, or I need to take the kids, or, whatever it is. This is going to allow an authentic response. And then the person, the other person is going to want to, or be more inclined to nurture the relationship. I see what she needs. I know what she needs. I'm going to do this. And it's, it's going to help.
Right.
And our children are our best teachers. Yeah. And children are our teachers. We know parents, we say this all the time, that our parents, our kids teach us so much. And we think we're teaching them everything. We think we're bringing all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge and all of the, the needs, but really, they're reflections, and they really show us what we're here to learn too. And so I think that having a really respectful relationship, and that giving our child that respect, that they are also these unique individuals that are coming into our lives to teach us things as well.
Yes. And if you've observed your child well enough, you understand when they look a certain way, or talk a certain way, or act in a particular way, what's going on with them. And it's, looks to me like you're feeling upset about something. You want to talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have that sensitivity, and they can learn that sensitivity too, to the other person's feelings, because you're never as close as you are within your family, but you can develop that even more so.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than, I remember a friend I worked with, she was so angry, I could almost see the steam coming out of her ears. And I went up and I gave her a hug. And she said, "What did you do that?" I said, "Because you're upset about something, and I just want to let you know I'm here."
Oh.
That's sometimes just enough,
Yeah.
If you recognize that in your children too, you could present them with the nurturing they need.
Yes. And I think we always talk about parenting as being an example for our children too. So really taking care of ourselves and nurturing our own personal growth, and how we, care for ourselves, is showing our child how to have that same sort of a, care and respect for themselves. Give yourself the time you need to. Mommy needs a timeout. You need a timeout. Like, it's an example. By really taking care of yourself and making your well-being a priority, you are an example of to teach your child how to do that and how to learn to do that for themselves.
Yeah, an important thing we teach them is in that Mars period is how do we handle anger?
Right, which we all have. So we need to know how to manage it. So how do you manage your own anger, right? Because your kids learn by example and you're modeling everything. And that's really
so if you're pounding on the table in anger, then your child is going to be doing the same thing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And, we see the little kid going, do, the same thing. And they're like little, models of you. And that's where it's like you paying attention. I think that's the biggest thing is like, if you're paying attention, they are showing you who you are.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so good. So good. So those are like some of the benefits, probably just some of the benefits. There's a lot, but that was like sort of encompassing them. Right. But there's really, really important do's and don'ts in terms of utilizing the tool of astrology for nurturing your children, your families, your relationships. And we're going to go into those now. And I think the number one that I put at the top was to trust your intuition first, because astrology gives us all this great information, but then we start to expect it to provide answers. And astrology cannot necessarily provide answers. It can provide clues and insight and guidance. Mm-hmm. But trusting yourself first is the biggest do, to know that you're the one observing your child. You know what he really is going through and needs. And I always tell people, you don't need astrology to be a good parent. There's a lot of resources. And if you're really observant and you're really self-aware, you don't need it, but I happen to think it's amazing and it's an additional tool and benefit. And if you're into it, it can provide amazing benefits, right, to the journey.
But you have to use it wisely, because if you become addicted to it, and I see this with it's like beginning medical students think they have every disease they're studying, but it's true. Beginning astrologers quite often say, immediately, where's the moon? What's affecting me today? And they get addicted to consulting it every day and running their lives by it, which is not what it's there for. It's to help you get insight into where the energy is. Is it with you today, or is it not with you? And maybe you should stay home and relax today. So that helps you, but you don't have to consult it every single day. Right.
And I found myself when I was early parenting years, when my child was young, I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm having this like rage of a day. And then I would go look and be like, oh, okay. It was validating, right? It was like, now I know why I'm ready to like snap him in half. And I don't have the patience I normally do. I see what's being triggered within me. And I can then go, okay, I know I need to take a deep breath, but I can also recognize in that moment, without looking at the astrology, something's up with me. I'm going through something here and I'm not my usual self. And so I need to check myself before I wreck myself. And I don't necessarily need the astrology, but I find that it's a great tool sort of validating, the insight. And then it's so powerful. I tell parents in the very beginning, if you just understand your child's moon and what they need to feel nurtured, you could spend the first, years just doing that, just focusing on that and being present, or then when they get into the school age years, you can get into a little bit more, they start talking, you can get into Mercury and these other things, but really just understanding the essence of their temperament, the foundation of temperament, and what they need from their moon can inform you for years. And then as they get older, you start to see and learn about patterns, and you have time to study or take those classes, you can really be informed and then more and more validated, and then learn more and more tools and more strategies based on the information you're learning. But, you can go down these rabbit holes when you have a child before they, I thought it was cool that I could understand the nature of my child before he could communicate with me, and that I could find ways to communicate with him without, before we could actually talk. I taught my child baby sign language because I needed to communicate with him. I'm a communicator. And so I was like, we're going to learn baby sign language because I'm a communicator and I'm not going to feel, sort of in control, right? Or like, no, if I can't communicate and I'm afraid I won't know how to read the signs, right? So I decided to teach him the baby sign language, and it made a huge difference. And it was, okay, so I knew that about myself. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to like communicate the way I want to. And I realized, nope, not true.
Yeah, I know.
Right? So it's really, really, I think, important to trust our judgment first and responsibly use the astrology and in a way that really works for us, and
Right.
staying, number 2 is like staying present and connected with your child and always observing them first, avoiding the labeling, like you said, just because my son's a Pisces and he is sensitive, but you know what? He's also got a lot of other characteristics and he's not always sensitive. Right. So, and you don't want to, even if you know that about your child, you don't want to say, oh, you're so sensitive all the time. You're labeling them. Right. So it's being aware of
or you're so stubborn.
Right.
You want your way all the time. You're so annoying. Or you're so slow. Why don't you hurry up?
Oh, I know. And the thing is, you're going to make mistakes. I mean, we've done it. My son does not move fast enough for me or my husband. And we're like, okay, we know now we got to give him at least 30 minutes to get ready to get out the door, or we're going to be like, and even then we're like, okay, 5 more minutes. But it's, again, you're not going to be perfect, but having this awareness and being careful and mindful about the way that we, share the.
Yeah, I'm one of those persons that takes a half hour before I can even get up. It takes me a while to wake up and get moving because I just want to lie there, just at least give me a half hour. So I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning because I had to be at school at 6.
Oh, wow.
So I'd have to spend a half hour just kind of doing nothing and then finally washing my face, all that stuff. So every child moves at their own pace.
Yep.
That was a problem in my family. I had 4 kids that we were all cardinal energy, mutable, constantly moving and going. And I had one son who was all fixed. And everybody was constantly telling him to hurry up. Where are you? Why are you always last? And that gets drummed into a kid's. And the only way they have of showing you that they don't like it is by slowing down even more.
Yep. Leaning into it.
Yeah, because kids rebel, and that's the only way they can rebel is by getting slower. And saying, I'll show you. You think this is slow.
It's true. It's so true. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Observing is so important. Observing your child's behavior and how it changes and why it changes.
Yes, absolutely. And then another big don't, or to try not to do, is avoid holding on to negative things that you read, the interpretations that you read. This is the biggest thing, is parents read something and they really can get freaked out. So you have to understand your limitations and your level of knowledge and know that nothing is in isolation. And
Exactly.
There is a positive and negative expression to every sign, placement, combination of planets, everything. Right. And we can respond. We have choice in how we respond to that. And if you don't like what you read, go look somewhere else. You know what I mean? You be very careful and mindful about what you're reading and what you hold on to. And I know it's hard. I know it's really hard when you're reading something.
Yeah,
but
it really is.
If you're triggered by something that you read, that is an indicator that you're maybe don't have enough information, or you're too close to it. And it's a good time to either step away if you can't reframe it, or seek information that gives you a different perspective, or seek out a professional astrologer who can really give you a larger picture, who, can focus in on what you're trying to understand, and give you a broader understanding of that placement or position, because that is the number one thing that I would say parents struggle with the most, is seeing something in the child's
Yeah,
chart
I
that
think I
scares
said,
them.
oh, I've got my Capricorn, my Saturn is sitting on my moon. Oh God, that's so bad. What does that mean? Well, nothing is in isolation. There's when you look at a chart, when astrologers come to look at it as a total, it's a whole person.
Mhm.
It is your whole person. It's also the journey you're on because you're developing from birth to the last few years. You're always developing things. And because your brain can change, they think that, okay, once you're an adult, that's it for you. No, the brain is plastic in that it changes. It can get rid of stuff and it can learn new stuff all the way up to the end. So just keep learning and your brain keeps working. It loves to. It's a learning machine. So never shut that down. But you also have to realize that when you're looking at a transit, for instance, yes, it could be this, but if you look at an astrology book where they talk about transits, they'll tell you it could manifest this way or it could manifest that way. And the best way to go is this way because it's the most positive use of that energy.
Right.
Right.
And I think that's, if you see something that's negative, seek out what is the most positive way to work with this energy,
Right.
because we can really get sucked in. And, seek, the next one is to seek and learn from many resources, learn from different astrologers, different approaches, different books and resources, so that you aren't, putting all your eggs in one basket. And like you were saying, just like a doctor, get other opinions. If
Right.
you're not satisfied, get a different opinion.
Right.
And then go back to number one, which is trust your own instincts about it. Your
Mhm.
child. And, also remembering the first benefit of understanding that they come in with their own soul path and journey is that, maybe Saturn in the fourth, in terms of having, some struggles in early childhood, or a father that's there or not, is part of the journey, part of the lesson that this little soul.
It may be that the child has a grandmother taking care of him.
Exactly. So it's so many possibilities. And if you're triggered, drop it and go, let it go. And, or seek out somebody who can really support, you in a positive way and help you reframe things in a way that doesn't scare you. So I always say, don't rule out fate, but practice free will.
Right.
And choose to use the astrology in positive ways rather than making you feel powerless, because there's a big debate about free will, fate and free will. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, on a show down the line here, because I find it fascinating. But,
well, let me give an example that I mentioned to somebody the other day.
Sure.
She was saying talking about transits and what they said. I said, every once in a while, you have something happen to you. I know it did to me. Something bad happened. I said, the first thing is, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Well, you don't always know because you don't see the big picture. Yep. Because when you move down the line, maybe a year from there, you'll look back and say, oh, I see, this had to happen before that could happen. So in the long run, it worked out for me. So even though I thought it was bad at the time, it really wasn't. So you get a different view of looking at these transits because they're teaching you something, and it may not be pleasant at the time, but eventually if you're looking for the big picture, you'll understand why that happened.
Yes. And that's going to be our next episode. We're going to dive right into that for our next episode, which is dealing with those, retrogrades, tough transits and positions, since it is such an important concern for so many parents, astrologers, anybody who's, looking at a chart or following astrology is going, what, this is bad. So we're going to reframe that stuff. And I think the last couple here, do's and don'ts, we sort of touched on, but basically reflect on your own childhood. We talked about that, upbringing, and consider the parenting style and how you can make adjustments and avoid projecting those biases that you may have had from your own experiences onto your children or others in your life. I think that's a really big important key. And that's why it's always about coming back to us and recognizing, well, why am I forcing my kid to play sports when he really doesn't want to? Well, I played sports and I liked it, or that's what my parents had me do. And aren't all kids, or aren't all boys supposed to play sports? No,
Yeah.
and so it's really that kind of thing, understanding, like, is it coming from my past and my experience and my biases, or is it coming from looking at my child, observing him, knowing his or her chart and what they are drawn to?
Now. Yes, in the here and now. Also,
in the here and now.
Quite often we find that if you didn't like the way you were raised, oh, my parents are awful, they were this or that or the other, I'm not going to be that way as a parent. And you go totally the opposite way. Mm-hmm. There's probably something in there, if you looked, that you found that was okay. I remember the biggest shock I had was one time I was talking about my father and all my grievances. And the therapist pointed out to me, he said, well, he must have done something right because you're a really nice person. And I had to stop and think about it. Yeah, then I started to think about all the good things, rather than all those grievances. So we don't want to make that mistake of following our parents or not following our parents. It's up to us to bring in the information we need to do a good job by ourselves.
Yeah. And I recognize
that leads into the next thing about expanding your knowledge.
Yes, exactly. Don't limit your learning to astrology. This is a great resource. And if you're passionate about it, it can provide a lot of valuable information, but it's not the only thing. Take child development courses or parenting classes, or, there's a lot of other systems too. There's human design and, all the different personality systems. And, there's all divination of all kinds people like to get into, which is fascinating. But I think primarily astrology, from our perspective, astrology and child development really do go hand in hand. And I think that that's something that we plan on going into in our series together, is to go into different subjects and talk about, tips and tools and strategies for helping us in our parenting journey every day and cultivating healthy relationships with our children and our partners and our families. And, these are like some broad benefits and do's and don'ts, but what we'll probably do is dive into each one, like the different, deeper dive into each one and why, or the placements in astrology and things like that. So
we could do a whole chat just on how do you discipline a child?
Right, which absolutely we will. So we want to know from you, which of these or other concerns you have. What we plan to do is once a month, we'll do a Q&A, and we'll take all these different questions and things that people have submitted and go on and actually answer questions, maybe even look at some charts anonymously. We'll see, but to definitely try and answer questions and really be able to engage with the community and help them.
Right. And the questions should be related to the specific chat that we had.
Exactly. Like we're going to, if we have a chat on the transits or how to navigate tough transits, share a question about, a tough transit you have, in your chart, because somebody else likely has that too. And we can give a little bit more insight into it and maybe some.
Right. And we can share. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope this has been helpful as an introduction, for the many benefits that we think astrology can provide parents and families and relationships of all kinds, and some of the important do's and don'ts, which I think are really, really important to remember. So stay tuned for our next episode, which we will go into a specific topic. So this was the overview, and now we're going to start diving into some of these things and going deeper and offering even more insight that we hope you find valuable and supportive in your journey. So
And give us your suggestions about what's topic you'd like to cover.
Yes, absolutely. If there's other things that, you'd like us to dive into or talk about in general or on the podcast, please let us know those as well. So Cornelia, thank you very much. And I'm excited we're going on this journey together, and we're going to be having these great chats and hopefully offering our community and way beyond lots of practical guidance and valuable information to help their families.
I hope our families raise happy,
healthy,
well-developed children.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. So I'll see you on the next one. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye. Bye, everyone.